Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. I usually don't talk much about myself, but what the heck, here we go. So, my background is in litigation. So I have worked in law firms my entire life since I was 21 years old. I did a long stint at a firm in Manhattan for 12 years where I worked on the Madoff case and we did complex bankruptcy litigation. So that was a really awesome experience. There were no softwares like Filevine that we could use back then. So we built our own homegrown system, and that's how I got introduced to this whole idea of case management. Worked at Filevine for a short time with Jasmine, which is really nice, and then moved over here to Vineskills and been at Vineskills now for 2 years. So a lot of what's in the template that we're going to walk through today is based on experience that we've seen work really well for litigations firms. Some firms who maybe don't do a ton of litigation can look to maybe streamline some of what I'm going to show you, and firms that really concentrate a lot on litigation will find this really a robust build, and we've seen very minimal changes when we share this build with our clients. So let me get right into it because that's not what I want to share. That's when the fun happens. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Can we see Jasmine? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I have here is a litigation template of our best practices in our sandbox. And when we're working with our clients, if you don't have a litigation section, or sections, these are sections that we can pop into your template or import into your template and make any changes that would be specific to your jurisdiction or the courts that you practice in. Some of them, like you can see, some of them are more complex, some of them are more basic, depending on the type of practice that you do. What we've done here is taken the litigation fields that we've seen in the past in Filevine builds out of the case summary section and actually given it its own section. And the reason that this is really good is if you practice in PI where there's pre-lit, not every case is going to go to litigation. So you can have these sections hidden using the managed sections over here. If you practice in another practice area where you do litigation all of the time, you can have these sections visible all of the time, and you don't need to worry about using the managed sections here. So to start, we start with, I'll go through the litigation section here and point out some fields that we would recommend customizing that are not really customized here because this is just our best practice. So you start with the date that the suit was filed, you enter your case number, and then your jurisdiction. Depending on where you practice, this is going to be important. Maybe you don't do federal court, maybe you just are limited to your district or your justice or your local courts, and we could customize that so that we make that specific. So for example, if you're in a district court, maybe you want to drop down here instead of a text field so that you can keep this consistent because you only practice in certain districts or in certain counties. And then you could even have a contact card for the court that this was filed in case you need to write letters or use them for doctrines. Nice link field here for local rules, your judge, your judicial assistant, and any judge's rules, depending on where you practice. Here we have our plaintiff and our defendant caption. This is really nice, especially for doctrines. If you're using doctrines to create different types of pleadings or even a certificate of service, affidavit of service, whatever your jurisdiction calls it. We used to call it an affidavit of service, but I know there's lots of terminology for that depending on where you practice. The nice thing about this build is it contemplates that you can have multiple plaintiffs, and there's different ways that this can work. When you think about best practices, if you're working inside a Filevine, best practice is to have a separate case or project for each of the parties that you represent. So you might, an example here for PI, you might have a master project and then you will have those other projects that are associated with it. I can't think of the word. What do we call them? They're companion cases. So you might have your companion projects. So maybe you now move over to litigation and you want all of your plaintiffs to be tracked in the master project. This is a nice way to do that. We indicate the number of plaintiffs here, either 1 or 2 or 3. You can build this out as much as you want. In this particular instance, another example for best practices, maybe you just want to be able to include plaintiffs that are part of the litigation, and maybe they're not represented by you, they're represented by another firm. So you can include that counsel right here. And then you can track if the plaintiff is settled or if the plaintiff has been dismissed. Going into defendants, we have one defendant because you always have to have at least one defendant. And then we can also indicate, and this is built out to indicate up to 4 defendants. And the nice thing about this, you can indicate again, defendant dismissed, settled, the date they were served with the litigation, and then when their response is due, and you can have those due done fields right here. And obviously, we all know how due done fields work. This date will go right into the project calendar and also notify you of those upcoming deadlines. Okay, so moving down here to the litigation deadline dashboard. So the way that we thought about this is that at least where I worked in New York, deadlines always got moved. There was always adjournments, there were supplemental dates, they were, just second, third, this, that. So we never really could utilize a deadline chain well because our dates were always moving around. And I said, how do you get around that inside of Filevine? And so we built out what we called the deadline dashboard, the litigation deadline dashboard. And what this allows you to do is put your dates in here in a deadline chain. So if in deadline fields, sorry. So if one of these dates changes, you're not impacting all of the other dates associated with it. So for example, we have our fact discovery cutoff due here. Maybe our interrogatories date is getting adjourned. So we just need to move that one date out. So this is really nice. Obviously, this is customizable. This is built out. It does include some federal dates or types in here. So we could customize this depending on where you practice. If you need to have an ad hoc deadline, you can use this. This will pop you right over to the ad hoc deadline section where you can enter your own deadline, as well as a calendar link that'll pop you right over to the calendar right there. This is a place where you can upload your case management order. If you have multiple, maybe there's adjournments that you want to be able to track all of that in one place. You can add that right here. So it just keeps it centralized and easy to locate. You don't have to go filtering through the doc section over here. Then we have a proof of service. Again, this term here I think is interchangeable: certificate of service, affidavit of service, proof of service. It means any one of those 3, depending on what you want to call it. This again is customizable. So the idea of building this out is that the only time you ever really need a proof of service anymore is when you're serving discovery, because that's really the only thing that doesn't get filed on the court's docket. So the way that this works, or the way that we envision this working, is you can enter all of the email addresses for any parties that need to be served in this box here. And then in the parties boxes, you will enter the counsel information. So in this example, Tracy Wilson and Sam Travis work at the Best Lawyers. Here's their address. Here are their emails, and they are attorneys for defendant X. Instead of having to separate them out, because we're listing 2 attorneys here, instead of having to separate both attorneys who work at the same firm with the same information onto 2 separate parties, we just list them right here. So this is where this text field becomes helpful versus using a person field. So that's why we have this instead of a person field. You can always use a person field, but just remember that then you're going to have duplicate contact information if you have multiple attorneys at the same law firm. And the thing that you'll be missing is being able to identify who they represent. So we found that this was a neat workaround for that. Then we have our proof of service document. So we can use this to pull in any of this information. If you need to send an email, you can use this button right here. It will pull in all those email addresses. You can send off that email. If you need a proof of service, it's going to pull in this information based on how you have it formatted. Moving down to arbitration. This section we have built out here. You can always move this to a collection section if you find that you're having more or multiple arbitrations, but in most cases we find that it's just one, and then you can track that in a static section. The trial section, you see some similar fields as we did in the litigation dashboard right here under the trial order. So this is going to track your pretrial conference date, any pretrial notes that you have, your date that the notice was filed. You can upload a copy of that notice here. Your trial order, the date your trial stops, and the date your trial ends. And the reason we put 2 deadline fields here is because you could have a trial that extends over multiple days, and you want to be able to see the start and the end date, not just the first date when it starts. You can track jury or bench. And then, of course, you can see that those fields do change based on what you're selecting. Your jury verdict, your deadline fields here. Again, these can be customizable, any trial notes and any trial documents that you want to upload here. Anybody have any questions? Because I know I've been talking a lot. Any questions out there, Jasmine? See some things in the chat. Oh, you were already answering a whole bunch of stuff. Okay.
Yeah, nothing's coming through the Q&A, but if you all do have anything, again, use that Q&A to drop it in.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to take a look over here at the complex pleading section. This one's going to take a little bit to explain. So actually, let me start with the basic because this one's a little bit simpler to explain. So this is the collection section because you're going to be able to track different types of pleadings. You can indicate your pleading type here, who originated or who the originating pleading started with, plaintiff or defendant. You can track that information here, defendant counsel, the date that it was served, the date filed, is there a response due? The response date that it was filed, the reply date that it was filed, and a hearing date down here. So this information is a little bit more detailed than putting it just like a calendar entry, because here you can pull any of this into a notice. So if you needed to file a hearing notice, you can pull this information into that hearing notice based on what's listed here. Any hearing instructions, hearing notes. So that's what that doctrine is right there. So this is a basic version. Like I said, just list your different types here that you can expand on this depending on the types of documents that you're filing. The complex version, and you're going to have to bear with me as I walk through this. So the complex version is really cool because it allows you to associate filings. So if you ever worked on a really big docket, like I said, I worked on Madoff and we had thousands and thousands and thousands of filings. And when that happens, sometimes the related documents can get lost on the docket. So the way that this was built is to allow you to continue to create that association. So like if you ever looked at a docket and then there's links that'll show you, oh, this relates to docket number 5 and 7 and 3. And that's what this is trying to replicate inside of Filevine. So we start with we don't start with our answer. We're going to start with the filing of our complaint. And filing party, the plaintiff, the docket number 1, you fill in all of this information. This becomes a nice record. You can enter the date the response is due, whether or not defendant counsel is accepting service. You can upload a copy of that complaint, the one that was actually served, your proof of service. Is the defendant in default, yes or no? Because the difference in this one is that you will have to create a complaint item for each defendant that you served. The reason being is you want to be able to track the defendant on a defendant level, whether or not they are on default. If you put all of the defendants into that one item, you won't be able to track that level of detail. And if that's not important to you, then that's fine. You can remove this, but this is what this is attempting to do here. So what happens here, I'm going to close this item. What happens now is the answer gets filed and the defendant filed that answer. And maybe you have a whole bunch of defendants and you want to be able to indicate all of the answers that were filed by all of the defendants. What we're doing here is this is the link back to the complaint. And what we did here is we grabbed this item link right here, copied this link here, and what we did was put it back in the complaint item. So now when you're in the complaint, if you just wanted to come here and let me look at all of the answers that have been filed, you can just pop this in, you save this item, and now you have a record of all of the answers that were filed in connection with this complaint. Maybe there was a motion to dismiss filed, or maybe there was, like I said, a motion to extend time to answer the complaint. So you can be able to associate all of the responses to that complaint in one collection item. So that's why this one's a little bit more complex, because you're doing those relationship building between the collection items in this section. Any questions about that? No? Okay. Wow. This is a breeze. I think we might end up early. I don't know. Okay. So now we're looking.
It does have their hand up. Will,
Okay.
if you can type your question into the Q&A, we can get it answered.
Should I hang out for a second to see what the question is?
Yeah, maybe. While we're waiting, just so that you all kind of remember, in the back end in that advanced, for each of those deadline options that you saw, you can create unique reminder schedules associated with those. If somebody's putting a template in for you, make sure that you go in and edit that. The Filevine default is a lot. It starts at 180 days before and goes all the way up to 180 days after. You don't necessarily want all of those reminders for all of these deadlines. That's really going to clog up your feed in both the activity and at the top of your kind of blue bar. So you do want to make sure that at least part of your cleanup is going in and creating reminder schedules for each of these kind of items, or some general ones that you can use for multiple of these items, and actually going in to associate that so that you're not getting inundated with reminders that you don't really need.
That's a good call out. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And we do have a question. Does the pleading section replace the document filing section in Docs?
It does not. It's more of a docket. So almost like a replica of if you were to go on the court's website and you have a historical docket of all filings with the court, that's what it's looking to replace or replicate, is like an index of all the filings in the case. We have some, so to talk about best practices, we have some clients who prefer to separate out motions and not to include all of the filing types in this particular section, which is fine. The only thing that you lose by breaking out your motions is that you no longer have a complete record of every document filed in that case. That's what this is really trying to replicate for you. So you don't have to go back to the court's website, incur additional charges every time you download that document and take a look at it. And when I talk about this, I'm thinking of a very high litigation firm that is doing a lot with filings, doing a lot with the court, because in that instance, you might have several attorneys who are going to the same docket, looking at the same document and incurring, ECF or PACER charges to look at that document each time. This allows you to pull it down and have that information here.
And within Filevine, the docs section in particular just houses documents. So even if you've uploaded the document into the pleading section, it's still going to save here in the docs section. The benefit of having an actual section where you're tracking that data is you can get a little bit more granular, A. B, you can break out the items that are in those documents so that you can pull them into DocGens, you can pull them into reports, and it makes it a little bit easier instead of you all having to manually go through each document each time you need the info in there. You've already kind of written it out in a section, again, to be utilized in other ways, and those documents will still save in both places. So it's not really a replacement.
Yeah, that's very important to note. It's definitely not this, like, for example, this filed copy, this is just giving you context. So in this context, here's the filing type, here's a copy of that document, and then it also lives in the doc section here. But it's nice to see it in the context of, oh, the answer was filed here, here's all the details surrounding the answer. It was docket number 2, here's the date it was filed, oh, here's the related filing. So it gives you a lot more context in here.
And with any of your documents, so maybe you've been emailed some of these things, maybe you're not uploading them yourself. If you've been emailed them and you have them in Filevine, you can still add them into this section without having to re-upload. You just are able to search the documents that are already in the project. So that's a nice way to relate them as well. We do recommend making that relation so that even if you have them in the doc section, once you've created an item in the collection section, go ahead and relate those documents back together so that it's easy again for you to find them. You're not having to go through all of your kind of answers within the doc section to find the one that relates to this.
There you go.
And then we have another question. Are these templates sold or is this a service?
So if you are working with Vineskills, we give you these templates for free. So it's just a matter of how you want to engage with us. So we have many different managed services types. So we have hourly support, we have monthly support. Along with giving you the templates comes a lot of the background and the best practice recommendations in terms of how to make adjustments to some of these to incorporate into your current template and what you're doing today. I didn't really go into the phases here, but this is pretty built out as well. I'm not sure, what your firm does, but we'd want to think about what are the litigation phases that you need. This is very robust. I'm not saying that every firm would need this many litigation phases. We might be able to make it more generic. So that's some of the conversations we would have with you when we share these templates with you.
That first link that I put in the chat is a link directly to our website for our support plans. So if that is something that you're interested in, feel free to check that out, or you can send myself and Nikki an email, and we can kind of get you set up with what that will look like. We do also offer free audits. So if you're like, we have a litigation section, but we may want to revamp it, or I'm not sure if it's really working for us, we do offer free Filevine audits. I also put that link in the chat, where members from our team will go into your Filevine. They'll assess kind of where you're at as far as usage or things that could be done better. And then we'll provide you with kind of, hey, here are some things that can get done. You can choose to work with us from there to make those things happen, or for us to just upload these kind of sections in there for you and go from there. So you do have a couple of options, and we're happy to help in any way that we can. So feel free to reach out.
Mm-hmm. Any more? We're all good? Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to experts and witnesses if there's no more questions. Okay. Experts and witnesses, another collection section. What we're looking at here, just choosing the type of expert or witness. And then, of course, all of those contingent fields that we expect would go with that information. Let's see, defendant witness. So we change depending on the type of witness that you have. And of course, depending on the type of firm that you are, you're going to need maybe additional fields here. Quick note right here. We indicate here that the CV for the expert is not going to be located inside of any of the collection items. And the reason being is that CV should stay with the contact card for the expert. That's a best practice that we've seen, because the CV for the expert is not going to change per case. It will change with that expert, but not on a case level. So you never want to be, rummaging through your cases to try and find that CV. You just want to be able to grab your expert contact card, have that CV in there, and then when you upload the contact, it's going to apply to any case that expert's been added to. So that's just a quick tip for a best practice if you're not already doing that.
And if you are like, I have no idea what that means, that's totally fine. We do help with that as well. But for your contact cards, all of them, you have the ability to customize, and you can make items hide or show based off of contact types in Filevine. So you can add an expert contact type where that CV upload will be in, again, their contact card. As you all know, contact cards are reused, so you're not creating a new one each time you're working with the same person. And so in the contact card in general, it's recommended that things that are specific to the person are kept within that contact card. Again, like Nikki mentioned, so you're not having to maintain those on an individual case-by-case basis. Anything that is case or matter specific should go in the actual project, because that can vary and you want to be able to retain historical data. But any of the things that don't change, like their area of expertise even, can be housed in the contact card so that it's easy for you all to be able to see and view that. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can use tags to kind of write that in. You can use a checklist on a tab within the contact card. So there's a variety of ways, but would recommend, again, uploading some of those items in there.
Let's see. Okay. I'm going to create this here. I'm going to go into this. Let's go in here. All right. So here's our details. We have the expert. Do we have? There we go. Right there. So that's what that would look like.
And if there's a standard fee agreement, you can get that uploaded right away too, again, so that your staff or yourself isn't having to go through and search to find these items. They're easily accessible. You can add additional tabs in the contact card as well, again, for some of that other information.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Jasmine. Okay, moving on to expert productions. Again, another collection section. The reason the productions are separate is because, and also because the reason they're in a collection section is because an expert can provide a production in multiple iterations. So sometimes you may get the full production based on your request, and then other times you may get it in piecemeal. So this allows you to track depending on how you receive it. Again, I think this is more used in more complex cases where you're working with multiple experts, you've sent out multiple document requests, and you're expected to receive multiple productions. You obviously, depending on the tools you use to track your discovery, you can even add links into those production or discovery platforms if you're using something like that. Do we have a question? No, okay. All right, depos, subpoenas, and interviews. These are lumped together because they're all pretty similar in the types of fields that we use and the type of information that we track. You can always separate them, but we found that they're very similar in the type of information we're gathering. So if we selected a depo notify us, an interview, we have subpoenas notify us or the other party, and then we have third-party depo notices. So really where this changes the most, I'm going to pick this one, depo notify us. Deposition type, again, this example is including some federal types like a Rule 45. So we can clean this up depending on where you practice. I'm going to select this one here. And then our notice type, what type of notice? Are we looking for a depo only? Are we looking for docs only? Are we looking for depo and documents? I'm going to select depo and documents so that I can show you some additional tracking that we've added. We can include our deponent, who's the primary attorney taking this depo, and the deponent's attorney, kind of went backwards there. Scheduling information, the date that that depo is scheduled. It is a deadline field because you want to receive reminders about that upcoming deadline. The fields here are for more detail. If you're looking to generate maybe a notice of deposition from this section, just like this doctrine indicates here, you can add a time, your method, in person or Zoom, and then you could generate, and then you could add your final served document right here, just so you have a record of that in this collection item. You can include your court reporter. We like to include lots of instruction text to help the user navigate through these sections. Any court reporter confirmation if you want to upload that here, so you have that ready. If a video is needed, the name of the videographer, a little checklist here. And then we like to use checklists. So did we serve the notice? Did we get the court reporter? Did we send it to the calendar? Was it confirmed? All those items have been completed. So now we get into the section about the interview preparation. Depo prep deadline, do you track that? If you do, this is a great way to give yourself a reminder that you have to prepare for an upcoming deadline. Here's some document uploads, depending on the types of documents you prepare in preparation for your depositions. Just some notes, note fields, and then your document production. So maybe your notice is looking for a deposition as well as looking for a document production. So you can indicate that here. And that was, again, noted by choosing the depo and docs. If I choose just depo, you can see that that doc section is no longer visible here. So that just gives you the flexibility to track both types of information depending on the type of notice that you're serving. Date objections are due, were objections filed? If they were, you want to maybe upload a copy here, and documents produced. Now, this may not be relevant if you're going to use this, if you're going to use a section like this here, or you may want to use just a document upload field. Again, it depends on how complex your litigations are, how heavy into litigation and discovery you are, because more than likely you'll want to have a collection section to be able to track the multiple iterations of documents productions that you receive. Interview or deposition transcripts. Transcript receipt. Did you get it? Just a reminder. Did you get the video? That's just another reminder. And then you could upload any of these fields here. So something that is listed here is the little sprinkles. And this indicates that this is a field that is associated with an AI prompt. So if I were to upload my transcript here, the AI would run in the background and provide me with a summary of the themes of that transcript. I also have listed here, identify inconsistencies in that deposition transcript, as well as any client depo and red flags that would have been identified if I uploaded that transcript here. So this is a really nice tool if you are heavy into depositions. This AI tool works really well. Save you some time in reading through those transcripts, depending on how many you have. So, do you have anything to add about the AI portion, Jasmine?
Yeah, Filevine just released it Lex Depo AI, which is like a separate entity that kind of allows for a more expedited response to your depots. So that way, when you're actually in the moment, you're able to say, hey, this wasn't clarified. You didn't really answer my question here. I'm going to need you to elaborate more, so that you get kind of what you need in those sessions. The little question mark at the top of your Filevine, right next to your sidebar, will have all of the new releases. You'll see them there in beta releases. And you can kind of go through. There are obviously more than just the Depo AI, but you can let them know what you're interested in and go from there. I think the Depo AI might have been a special release for the Lex folks, but it should be coming down the pipeline. So definitely be on the lookout for that. If you do utilize these analysis, you can also run them in the docs section. So if you don't end up adding in the transcript for some reason to that section, you can still run AI in the doc section, or maybe you've only added one analysis type in the section, but you want to actually get a few more. You can kind of pick and choose which items that you want. They're broken down. Deposition is right by demand. Yeah. So you can choose the type, and then again, we had all of those listed out in our section. You may choose to not have that listed out, but you can still run that analysis there, which is really nice.
Thank you. Any questions, or we're still good?
Looks like we're still good.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to pop into the written discovery section. This is also another collection section, lots of collection sections in the litigation template. Here we are. This one starts out with our action, and this does again include some federal, so we can clean this up like the Rule 26 conference. If you're not practicing federal court, we'll limit the number of options you have here. So if I wanted to select, let's go with interrogatory request. So in this, my action is I am requesting interrogatories. Who's the plaintiff that is requesting them? Who are you requesting them from? If there's any additional defendants that you want to include on this particular interrogatory request, you could add them here. Defendant counsel, and then any additional defendant counsel listed here. The title of the document, the set number. So this could be first set of interrogatories, second set, supplemental, amended. So that's what that is tracking there. If you want to track who drafted it. And then we have draft discovery for AI analysis. So this is another AI prompt. If you upload this here, there's a text box right here that will indicate the output for potential objections of any interrogatories that you're drafting. So this is a nice way to kind of check your work in preparation for finalizing that document before you send it out. Enter the date it was served if you want to upload a served copy versus a draft. When the responses are due, again, more instruction text. And then where responses served, you could track that information all in one collection item. So the item that was served and the response that was provided. If the client requests, or if the defendant requests an extension, you could track that here. Sometimes there's multiple extensions, and then this, this might change as well up here with the set. So if you have the date the extension was requested, the number of days requested, the original response, and then the new response due date, this gives you a nice history of how many times you provided an extension. Discovery dispute details. If there is a dispute about the discovery, this is a nice place to record that information. You can even populate that into some type of tracking report if you have multiple multiple discovery items in play at the same time. It's nice to be able to run reports on this information using the collection section export in this collection section. I don't have one built out to show you, but I've seen that done with other clients where they've built out a custom template and then they could run the report from the section to track any discovery disputes or any other particular data point in this section. Motion to compel. Have we filed a motion to compel? If you're filing a motion, you just want to indicate, yes, I'm filing that motion, but then we're going to tell you to go back over to the motion section, which was over here in the pleadings. You can label this pleadings and motions, whatever you need to, and then track that information in this item. So it really depends on how you practice. This is more just of a yes, no, did we file one, so that you can keep track that one was filed on this particular discovery item. And then you go back to that pleading section and you can call it, like I said, pleadings motions to track everything that's filed on the docket. The reason we separate the two, discovery is not filed on the docket, any other type of motion or pleading is.
And for an item like that, an action item like that, you can always add a button so that it can open in a new tab, that pleading section. You can fill out what you need and then come back so that you're not having to create this without all of the info, go back and then come back. So would recommend if you do find yourself or your staff having to go and jump sections quite a bit, to go ahead and put some of those buttons in to help with that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Then we have notes box. It's always nice to take notes if you need to, have a space to do that, any documents you want to upload related to this item. And then here we have our email to the proof of service contact. So what this goes back to is that if you remember on the litigation page here, we had that proof of service section. So what that's pulling in is any email address that you listed here. So that's how that's set up so that you can grab all those email addresses when you're ready to serve your discovery. Okay, I'm going to move over to mediation. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're pretty good, right? Yeah. All right, so mediation. It's really not a huge section. It's just going to track your mediator, your mediation date, another deadline field so you can get that on your calendar with some reminders. Again, the detail of the time in case you want to have a document that pulls in a mediation notice method, in person or Zoom, more instruction text. You get to include your mediation notice if you're interested in keeping your documents inside of your collection items, the date the mediation notice was served, plaintiff mediation statement, defendant mediation statement, top offer, minimum authority from the client, some notes. And then this really is just to track the outcome of your mediation. Was the mediation continued? Meaning, are you going to have another mediation? If you're going to have it, if it's continued, we're using another deadline field. Again, it kind of replicates the information about the time and then the method. And then you can indicate whether or not you have a mediator invoice that you need to track, and upload that mediation invoice here, and whatever internal processes you have for submitting those invoices. If your mediation it failed or an impasse, then you can note that here. And this is just really good for reporting purposes. You can keep track of what's going on with your mediations, whether it's settled or not. Okay, so our other sections that are left really are just the basic sections that are included. We do have an appellate section, and I'll go through that because depending on how many appeals you have in your practice, this is helpful. This is also listed as a collection item. You can indicate your filing party here. This is a person upload, the date the appeal was open, your case number, your primary court. This is a drop down, so you'd want to list this based on your area where you practice, your jurisdiction, the judge, any formatting requirements that you have, the nature of the appeal, oral argument request, and then you can calendar that. Again, briefing information here, oral argument, the time, the appeal decision, whether it was denied, granted, granted in part, and then any appellate records requests, file record, and hearing transcripts from that appeal. So I can get into something complex if everybody has time and wants to do that. Any thumbs up on that?
I don't know if they could do thumbs up, but let's go for it.
Okay, let's do it. So depending on where you practice, your case may go up or down in the court. So maybe you start in the district court and you end up appealing some decision, and it goes up to the appellate court. And how do you know what court you're in? How do you look at the case and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what court I'm practicing in right now? There's a couple ways to do that. And depending on the size of your firm and the type of tools that you have in Filevine, there's one way you can do that manually. So you can always start in the collection section here and indicate the current court that you're working in. So for example, if we wanted to say that we started in district court and we moved over to the appellate, you'd come in here and create this appeal item. Then what you can do, if you don't have automations, it's a little bit more of a manual process. And what we've done for firms is we've built out in the litigation static section, we've built out a section that uses the header current court. And so what that does is that you would enter the current court where your case is actually in, or the jurisdiction your case is actually in that moment. So right now this says court information. You can indicate here current court information. So this is going to be where you go easily. This is where my court is. Now, if you don't have automation, this is a manual process. You'll have to go in here. You'll have to update this information manually to indicate that. If you have Workato automations, the nice thing about that is we can set it up so that you can take this appellate item, and if this is the current court that you're in, we can do on save or click a button, push this information into the litigation item here. And then what it does, we can also have the automation create an item that pulls out this old information so you don't lose it. So you would take your original court information, it'll create an item, and you push in your current court information. So it's almost like an exchange of information. So it always keeps your current court information visible at the very top of your litigation section. I know this is kind of complex. It really depends on your practice. It depends on how much your cases move between courts. And that's something we've had to solution with some mass tort firms that do move back and forth between courts, some other firms that just really concentrate in complex litigation, again, moving back and forth between courts. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, I'm happy to dig into that with you. We have an automation team that has worked on similar automations for, like I said, those mass tort firms that need to be able to move between courts and also know where are they in a certain time period. So I know like that may be over some of your head and not really applicable to what you do, but if it's something you're interested in, I'm happy to meet with you and chat about that. Okay, I think other than that, I think we've made it through everything. These doc section, we all know what the doc section is, the calendar section.
What I'd recommend, or what we'd recommend typically for, you saw a lot of places to upload documents or add documents within the sections. In the advanced tab in customs editor, you can map your folder structure so that any document that's uploaded to a specific field will go into a specific folder in your docs section. Would recommend probably doing that for those so that you don't just have documents floating in your docs section that you're then going to have to go in and move. On top of being able to map them to a specific folder, you can also auto tag them. Tags are a way for you to categorize and filter your documents, your people, your projects, anything like that. And that allows you, again, for any document that you've uploaded into that section to automatically go there with the tag so that you and your staff aren't having to think about or do some of those pieces manually. Nikki's walking you through kind of how to do that. Advanced tab, customs editor, select your project template, and then you'll see there the ability for you to add tags and select which folder you want that document to be automatically moved into. You can always move or add additional tags after the fact, but again, this helps to alleviate some of that additional work that you may have when you're in an actual project. Awesome. I don't see any other questions right now, but do kind of want to reiterate some of the things that we discussed today. If you do decide to work with us in the future and you liked these litigation sections, we can definitely get them added in for you. If you're like, hey, I don't know where I want to start, but I know that I'm probably going to need some work, whether that's the phases, the sections, even just mapping your documents over, we can definitely do that. Again, I added a few links.
There's the Google form, Jasmine.
For suggested topics. Let me go ahead and see. If you can shoot me an email, or I can shoot you one if need be, and I can get that sent over to you. I'll have to check with our marketing person. She's the one that set it up. So to see kind of what those permissions are. For suggesting another topic, we are definitely open to hearing your suggestions. We do these in order to help you all. So if you have suggestions on free help topics that you want to see, definitely feel free to fill out that form once we're able to get it to you if you've had any issues. Again, we can send it over so that we can get an idea of what topics you'd like to see on these free help Wednesdays. Again, we do record these, so we'll post those. There is a link to the free audit in the chat as well. So if that's something that you want to take advantage of, feel free to sign up kind of there, and somebody from our team will reach out to you. I don't think I missed anything, Nikki. If there's any last things you want to say.
No, it was a lot of fun getting to share this with you. This is like my passion. So I love litigation. If you guys have any ideas that you want to brainstorm together with, please reach out, because we're always happy to offer working sessions and talk through, you know, whether or not you're using best practices, even a template audit to help you recognize where maybe you can make some improvements based on what we've seen work really well when it comes to the litigation practice. So thank you for joining today. Love that you were interested in hearing more about this.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nikki. We hope to see you all in a future free help session. And thanks for joining us today. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.